and said, "Do you know the way to Memphis, love?" And she turned around and said, "No, I'm not from round here." that just set the day off.
Ordered! Send Moorhouse to save the house! Come on, the house!
Hello all, so here we go again. It's a good evening to the two Joes. We're certainly cracking on with these podcasts, lads. So how you going on, Joe Martin?
Yeah, I'm all right. I haven't really got anything of any note to mention. No, it's been a slow week.
Has it really? Been out for your runs?
Yeah, I've been out for my runs. I did a really hilly one the other day. This is as exciting as it gets for me, a hill run. Started reading a book.
Really? What book?
Oh, no. Oh, God. It's called, I'll just get the title. It's called Gödel, Escher and or Bark, An Eternal Golden Braid. It's by Douglas Hofstadter, who was a computer scientist.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, good that, Joe. Adam's gonna have his hands full editing again. I can see. I'm all right, Jess. Thanks. I haven't been up to much really. I did go for a walk though, and we bumped into Peter Smith, House superfan, province of Lowerhouse, and he's been listening to the podcast and he's enjoying them as well. So hello to Pete.
It's great to see that people are enjoying it in these difficult times. We've got people now, we've got ex-players, we've got current players, we've got supporters that are already lined up to come on to the show to give their two penneth or to answer some questions that have been raised previously. So that's really fantastic. We've got a few famous people ready and lined up. We're just trying to get out the best times and days for them to come on. So that'll be a fantastic listen for everyone as and when we get them on. But I think it's important to anyone who's listening, if you feel you want to come on or you want to contribute in any way, whether it's questions, it's not exclusive to players, any spectators who would like to join, it's easy to join, it's just on Zoom, so give us a shout and we'll get you on. Massive thanks to Johnny Russell and Milltown Pies and the Art Catering. He sponsored this event. It cost us a few quid to get on to various mediums to produce this and then get it out onto Apple and Google, and it's now on YouTube. So thanks very much, Johnny, and if we can support him, go and give him a shout, see if you can get some pies delivered. Here we go, I'm Jezzo. I'm hosting tonight. I've got Joe Beneducci with me, who's a legend in the first captain of Lowerhouse first team to win the Lancashire League in 2005, and we've got with us as well Joe Martin, our current and outstanding and eccentric first 11 wicketkeeper, and what a top lad he is. He's contributing massive to this. Let's move on to our guest. We've been in negotiations with him for a couple of weeks to get him on. He's been mentioned a few times over the last 2 or 3 podcasts. It's a long, long way away from where we are, so this signal will be flying up, travelling north to the land of Lowerhouse. Our guest this evening is Gary Moorhouse. Welcome to the Housecast, Gary. How are you?
Great, Jess. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for having me on. Enjoying all the previous podcasts that you've been putting out. They're fantastic.
It's so good to have you on. And how's life down in Devon for the old lockdown? How's it keeping you and Fran and the girls?
Well, it's slow. It was slow down here when I moved down, and it's gone even slower, which is unbelievable. So yeah, I mean, family's all back together for the first time in 6-7 years. So that's as big a challenge as anything. We're all keeping safe and well, and everyone sends the best to the West End. So yeah, we're doing all right. 15 years this November, Jez. 15 years.
Really? Right. I mean, we did used to, times go on, and I know when you moved down there, a bit of a wrench for all of you because it's, you'd made the decision to go, and then we saw you for a few years afterwards. Then there was a couple of years where we didn't bump into each other. But I think it's safe to say, Gary, the last time you came up was only a few months ago, and I certainly can't remember the last 4 or 5 hours of it. I don't know about you.
We're a bit wild, yeah.
It was a wander around Padiham, watched Padiham football, I wandered back into Burnley, ended up in the Green Hill till all hours, and Fran actually picked us up and took us to the Green Hill, if I remember rightly.
She did, yeah, fantastic.
So come and join us. Stand west in tight hands. Worsley Cup still gleaming. Years without a cup. Never stopped us dreaming.
Welcome to Stories with Stan.
A very popular story about a popular lad, Chris Bledsoe, obviously our greatest ever batsman and one of the Lancashire League's greatest ever batsmen. It's been drawn to my attention, 20th of August 1994, a 46 over him. Church bat first, 174 for 9 off the 46 overs. Blaise has a couple of catches. Great fielder as well. Still throws himself around that boundary edge. He's absolutely marvellous. And by the way, still practising during this lockdown by himself. Jez Hope, 13 overs, 2 for 38. The professional was Craig Light, who, if truth be known, wasn't a bowler, but he went for less than 4 and over. Cappy had 4 for 51 because it was a sticky track. And Matt had 3 for 36. 174 in those days would be over 200 today, so not to be sniffed at. However, the batting really was a joy. We won with 10 overs to go and we were 175 for 2. Yours truly 83 not opening the innings. N.G. Hope, run out, how ironic in view of past podcasts, 23. No doubt he'll say he was more than me when he was run out. Craig Light, the professional, 20. Craig Light's first ever score for Lowerhouse was 121 against Ramsbottom. We thought, this is it. We've signed the world's greatest batsman. I mean, he wasn't bad, but it went down after that for sure. Chris Bledsoe, 35 not out. The interesting thing about this is I've never scored officially. I'm not sure if this was my highest ever score. I thought 80 odd against Hollis King, but we digress. With these 10 plus overs, in fact, there were probably about 14 overs left when Blaise came in, maybe even more. And I'm on something like 80 not out, thinking 35 runs needed for victory. I can get me 100 here. Get me maiden 100 after 12 years, after 18 years of cricket. I'd had hundreds in other cricket. The Church bowling, the pros going for 5 and over. Johnny Longdon, the opening quickie, is going for 9 and over. Nick Westwell, another useful player, is going for 4.5 and over. Ferguson, again a decent player. That's Kenny Ferguson, the umpire now. He's going for an over. But I was particularly punishing on Longdon and to a degree the pro and Westwell. So here we are in this happy situation for Stamp. Look forward to his maiden century. Bowled a decent ball all day. Concentrate, nothing can go wrong. 4, 5, 6 overs later, I've scored 3 more. I'm 83 not out, and Blaise has smashed 35 not out to secure a decent score for himself, and of course, ruin my potential for a maiden century. I was a young kid. I've done the same to Mohinder Amarnath earlier in my career. He was on 46 not out. Needing 4 for his 50, obviously. I was not out and hit the next 5 balls for 4. And I just said to him on the way off, I'm sorry, Jimmy, I needed that 28 more than you needed that 4. So I wasn't particularly bothered what Blaise had done, but the interesting fact is this. Every time he hit a 4, he would walk down the wicket with us, pat the lump down, because lumps were created in those days by the ball pitch soft tracks, and give me a little sneak look out of his left eye to see what my reaction was. And I kept saying, Blaise, don't worry, pal. Not sure I really meant it. Don't worry, pal. If it's there, you hit it. And my goodness me, did he take me at his word. But there was a little bit of poetic justice. I don't know if it was after this. I'd be gilding the oil if I said for sure it was. But Blaise and I were batting, and on 3 successive matches, he will say, I ran him out. I say, he ran himself out. One particular game at Burnley, which I think was the 3rd, he called for a quick single. I was going back to the non-striker. So I turned around and said, no, Blaise's run out, threw his bat. Most un-Blaise out, but basically Chris had to learn how to run with me.
But we went to watch England-Zimbabwe in year 2000. And Gary we all went dressed as Elvis, probably 15 or 20 of us. I've put all the pictures up behind me now I know no one can see it on the podcast, but crikey, going off bringing back memories all dressed up as Elvis with South African international cricketer Martin van Jaarsveld there and with his Elvis hat on. Fantastic memories, Gary. Can you remember that day?
Oh, that was brilliant, because Neil Johnson, who prod at church the season before and larruped us all over the place a couple of times, he was playing for Zimbabwe, and these 15 Elvises on the terrace before it was like, the stadium it is today, just giving him jit for like 7 or 8 hours. And he must have thought, where the hell am I? Who's this lot?
It was great memories. If I remember I look back, you made your first team debut in 1990. Can you remember how old you were and what year it was when you first came to the club, Gary?
It was a bit circuitous, really, Jez. The old man, God bless him, Arthur Bryan, he played down at Lowerhouse in the early 70s. And I remember, him and my mum had split up, but I remember tagging along with him a few times to games, and went places like Rottenstall and Enfield and Todd, and people like Duncan Hall, Peter Wade, Iggy, Tony Bennyworth, Trevor Jones, those sort of players of that era, sort of not knowing them at the time, but sort of later on remembering who they were. Yeah, so that was really my first intro to Lowerhouse as a fledgling supporter at that point.
Yeah, so early 70s. I haven't got it down here, Gary. When were you born? Late 60s?
65, Jez.
65, crikey, I thought you were a bit younger than that. So early 70s, you're under 10 and you're wandering around with your dad. Can you remember anything about it? You remember the Rottenstall, obviously, Rottenstall away you mentioned.
Yeah, not a lot. I mean, I did the wandering. I think he had a fixed position in the clubhouse for most of it. But I can remember one incident. I think he was at Todd, and I must have done, whatever, 6, 7 or something. I'd done something wrong or whatever. And I remember one of the players, I think it might have been Peter Wade, and he just got this soda. You used to have those big soda siphons on the end of the bar for soda. And I just remember him chasing me all around this clubhouse and just lashing me with his soda siphon. And yeah, that sort of, I didn't go on many trips after that, I don't think.
Sam will obviously, recount tales about your dad and Peter Wade and, Alan Southers and Bordwells and all those sort of people. Fortunately or unfortunately, they weren't our times, but I'm sure they had as much fun as we did. When did you first get involved, in playing or being, wanting to start to play cricket down at Lowerhouse, guys?
Well, at Lowerhouse specifically, it was probably, obviously the year I came, but sort of getting into cricket in the sort of teenage years, I was at Burnley Grammar School and they were cricket mad. Jens Slesson, who was wicketkeeper for God knows how ever long at Burnley, he was a sports teacher. Dave Sheridan, Uncle Dave, he was there teaching at that time. So they were all cricket, and we used to love it because Wednesday afternoons you'd finish at you'd finish at 11:30 and just get on a coach and you'd go to Blackpool or play a team or school there, or you somewhere in Yorkshire or Manchester, and it was just great, and we had a good time and we played decent cricket and good games and stuff like that. So that sort of got me into it at that age. And then I think Gordon Allison sort of got a couple of us down at Burnley, funnily enough. My dad didn't talk to me for ages, mainly because I didn't know where he were, but he still didn't talk to me because we were playing down there. And we had a pretty good team. I think we won the Lancashire League under-15s, and that team, I've got a photo of it somewhere, I should have showed you. But I think it was John Bushell, me, Duncan Spencer, Dave Worley, Darren Taylor, Bonce, Ian Whitehead, Ian Garnett, Phil Meldrum, Alan Entwistle. I mean, if no tells, we'd have been a fantastic football team, but it was pretty good. So I loved it. So we'd be playing good cricket at school. We'd gone down there, we'd playing at Burnley, and I thought it was great. Yeah, so this is at Burnley. So I'm full of 11 games. And like in those days, you check Burnley Express out, didn't you, see if you'd been picked or whatever. And we got picked for a local derby down at Lowerhouse. So we rocked up, it's great. 10 minutes before umps are going out, we're all changed, we're all ready. Jack Stott, who run the 11 ex-Lowerhouse player, ran Burnley 11 at that point, walks in, points at me and Chris and says, "You two, you're not playing." I looked at each other, and in walks his lad John and his mate, and these two were playing. And that were it. So we left. And,
10 minutes before the
didn't
game?
go back, basically. Yeah, 10 minutes before the game at dressing rooms. We had whites on and everything. It would bang out of order. But so, I mean, Jack started playing the same era, I think, as my dad down at Lowerhouse. So maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. But yeah, it were out of order. And felt like me a little bit. I thought, well, if that's what adult cricket's like, if you like. So I didn't play for a few years. I was working at Lucas's and knew Graham Bushell a bit and played an odd game, Ribblesdale League, and he just said, "Why don't you have a look down in Lowerhouse? They're a great bunch of lads." I think he rang Lofty or something like that to just arrange to come down one night. And I remember you coming over and introducing yourself, and we had a net, and that were on when practice wickets. We used to go down across all bowlers, run ups on Edgett Square. And you bowling at me for the first time, that were interesting as well. But so that were it. That's how I got to Lowerhouse, Jez.
Right, brilliant. So how old would you have been when you came to Lowerhouse for that first time? I remember that. I remember you coming over when I was at I thought you'd played at Belvedere or Lucas. I didn't realise you'd played at Burnley as a junior.
Yeah. Well, it was 90, so I think it was 2 games a season, maybe. So it might have been early May, something like that. The league that season, and then came down Lowerhouse really on say so Graham Bushell more than anything else. Didn't really know anybody.
Right, brilliant.
I'll be 24 then. I think I'll be 24.
Yeah, 24. And that. So did you play many games in the second team then?
Played a handful of games, got a couple of scores maybe. Maybe it were holiday season or there were a couple of injuries or whatever. So yeah, I got a chance first team then. I think we break up a Rishton debut or something like that. So. So I didn't have a lot of introduction to senior side cricket really.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? That you've come in and it's tough. Then there's some big name pros about then at that time. In '91, you got your first 50, didn't you, in a cup game at East Lancs?
Yeah, that were a day night affair or over a couple of nights. So yeah, I think it was something like. And when I got 50 on Monday night, there were one man and his dog.
Yeah, I do remember that because we had Prabhakar as pro.
In '90, I think the first 5 games, I think they were all test players who we played. I think we were Harper. I think we played Peter Sleep twice. Mike Whitney, who got 8. That was Matt's famous debut as well. But they were only about 4th or 5th game. Yeah. I think Whitney got 8 for that day and turned us over. And I think Colin Miller, I think we played Rotten, so maybe it was Colin Miller. So they were all like quality players. So it was a real induction. There were no easing in sort of thing. And then that season you're talking about, 91, when we provoke it, everybody just seemed to have a pace merchant. I just couldn't believe it. We were like Rudy Bryson and Lyndon Johnson, I think, maybe Franklin Rose or something like that, Joe Angel. It just seemed to be one after another. And they were obviously, good players. And I don't know whether it's like that now that people get that type of professional. Chris Killen were knocking around and he were a proper head the ball, weren't he? He was mad. So yeah, there was some quickies.
Was the cup still gleaming? Years without a cup never stopped us dreaming.
Welcome to Stories with Stan.
Try to keep on top of those toilets as well, Jez. I think they go right back to Sir Gilles de Creek.
Yeah, I think they possibly do. I think that could be a story. I mean, he could have built them, couldn't he?
Well, I think he could certainly have christened them.
This is not in plan, but just give us the detail of the origin of Gilles. Right.
Well, as you know, we were hugely unlucky, without success of any grade for 142 years, and probably into about year 125, and we'd have lost some catastrophic game or something like that. And Clifford and Joan, bless them, had decided to renovate the small room, the back room as we called it. They decorated it with plant pots. It was a sort of white and green colour in various formats, wallpaper, etc. And they put a few artefacts in that weren't really cricket related. One of which was a silver and black etching of a medieval knight in full uniform. And that hung where the current Spectator's Player of the Year hang. And it was about, 2 feet long and 6 inches wide. And it was, as I say, it was this medieval knight. Absolutely nothing to do with cricket. But we christened him Sir Gilles de Creek. And his treatment of the previous occupants of the cricket ground in medieval times, which was nuns, and some dreadful treatment was handed out to these nuns, legend had it, and as a result of which they put the curse of Sir Gilles de Creek, who was the knight responsible for those atrocities, and they put the curse on the ground, and it was only lifted when Ben Heap tipped Barry Knowles straight down to the wickets, which is apparently, unbeknownst to me, was an ancient medieval ritual for...
We could never work out what it was. We tried also.
The legend of Sir Gilles de Creek, and Jez, bless him, has done his best to keep the memory of Sir Gilles alive, but with referring to him. But I suppose it's some of the daftness of the club up, really. That, I mean, we now have tributes to Ryan, Blaise, Martin van Jaarsveld, Jacques Rudolph adorning the walls. Jez is there with his is it your 500 wickets trophy, Jez? I think it is.
Yeah.
You were there with that. And all rightly so. And you look at that and you think, wow. And Ben Heaps is there, of course. Back in the day, we had a plant pot and Sir Gilles de Creek.
The voice from your side was going. It was almost like every 30 seconds per minute. It just went slow for a little bit and then kicked back in.
It sounded like you had a stroke.
Yeah. And then
to ask you if you remembered the first game of that season, because there's a bit of a recurring theme happened in the first game of that season, which regular listeners of the podcast will have heard us talk about before. You open the batting with Stan at East Lancs, first game of the 91 season.
I know what you're going to say.
I'm just looking at the card, and it's Moorhouse, run out, 0.
Run out.
I'd love to know how many run-outs that buffoon was involved in, because it seems to be everybody that we talked to, ever batted with Stan, was run out.
I'm just going to concur with what everybody says. I mean, Stan had many fine attributes as an opening batter, but judging a single wasn't one of them. And wherever was going through his mind, I'll never know. And I am with you, Joe. I'm willing to bet there's been nobody involved in more teammate run-outs than Mr. Heaton. Absolutely.
Can you remember that one, Gary, or not? I can't remember it, but can you remember it?
Yeah, because I think it was probably the first time I'd either opened, or certainly the first time I'd opened with him. And I think it was first over. He'd middle once. Maybe it was Mooney. It was somebody who was pretty sharp in the field. He was like, yes, and I'm second season or first full season or whatever. Junior lad, he's senior pro. What do you do? Yeah, East Lancelot were absolutely pissed in the sides laughing.
I mean, it's interesting that when we've done this over the last few guests, Gary, Joe or Dooch will come up with a game and say, what about that? And, so then we'll try and probe it a little bit. And every season, almost, every other game, there is a story there to be had. That 1991 was my first game as first team captain. Whether people have heard this or not, but I'll just quickly, as I can, explain. Harry Brooks, God bless his soul, was involved in the committee side and getting involved in the players' side. And he got quite heavily involved with David Wren in looking at professionals and, how he could improve the club. And he got this lad, Manoj Prabhakar, who, you looked at him on paper, was one of the world's best all-rounders. Fantastic bowler, fantastic batter. This first game, and I didn't realise that it was, Gary's first full season. We're trying to be very professional. Can you remember it, Gary, going to East Lancs?
Yeah, I do, yeah. Remember it really well.
Really, really cold. We've not met the pro before the season, but Harry assures us he will be there for the first game. A little bit like Stan said, I've got me outfit from my denim factory. Matt wasn't playing that game, but Phil Hastings no doubt turned up in his cowboy hat. Stan turned up in his CID suit that he used to interview shoplifters with, and we've all turned up. Dave Abrams playing that game, and I mean, properly, I really want to, start off well. Prabhakar doesn't turn up until probably 10 minutes before the start of the game. Clearly freezing cold. I can't say he wasn't interested at the time, but I think after playing with him for a full year, he wasn't really switched on as much as he should have been. We toss up. We won the toss, it says there. We decided to field. And Prabhakar fields in about 6 jumpers. Not a word of a lie. There's a story about 6th or 7th over. He's got into it. You can tell he's swinging it both ways with all these jumpers on. And East Lancs Pro was Paul Rifle. Yeah. And extremely famous international umpire and fantastically successful Australian cricketer. And Rifle hit him through covers, one of the first 2 or 3 balls that he faced, and shouted some at Prabhakar, and it ruined his whole season, Prabhakar's whole season.
Yeah.
Completely went to rat shit after that. I'll never forget it. And then, like I said, I didn't realise it was the same game that Gary got run out. And they only got 172, and looks like we didn't get anywhere near it. So yeah, you're right, Gary. There were some top pros in, and you've been thrust into it a little bit in there. But I've got to say, and I know it's one of my old sayings, I'm not blowing smoke up your backside. You handled it very well. You came in, you didn't look like you were out of your depth, and you came in and looked like you could play at that level of cricket. What were your thoughts for those first couple of seasons?
Yeah, it was tricky because there weren't. I mean, we might come on to how the club's evolved, and there wasn't Lowerhouse in particular, and the Lancashire League rules at the time were, you had to live or work within so many miles. Was it 5 miles of the ground or something to actually play for the club? And so there wasn't a lot of bringing people into the club to strengthen it or new faces or whatever. If you came through the youth system, then that was much it. So trying to fit in and there was obviously a change from of eras. When I started, I think Lofty retired maybe the season I started, and Iggy was still playing, and Phil Astin and Andy McNicholas, Brian Holmes for a bit, I think. And then Trip played that first season. So there was a lot of history and sort of tradition and people who obviously knew the way around Lancashire League. So to try and fit in at that level, and then also, but starting the seconds with a lot of lively youngsters, Peony and Proc and Ryan and Matt, and it was tricky. If nothing else, everybody was fantastic. I don't think there was anybody begrudging, somebody coming and trying play a better standard or help the club out or whatever it was.
Yeah, and I do remember, when you're coming in, never mind getting run out by Stan at that game. You made your debut the season before when Delroy Morgan was pro and Tripp was captain. And I do think that season was a bit of a turning point. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. But Tripp was part of the whole school, and we were trying to get to a different sort of, not because of Tripp, but getting away from the jackays, all that sort of mentality, until it professionalise a little bit with a young David Wren running our show. How did you feel when you were making your debut? I think there was a break up at home the first game that you played.
Yeah, again, it was a bit of unknown because playing against Roger Harper, you'd not sort of played against anybody of that sort of ilk, knocking around Ribblesdale League and the like. If you'd come through the junior side and you're around the second team for a bit and you get the feel of all that sort of thing, it's less of a surprise. So that was a bit boring. I mean, the Bay Cup lads are always got a bit of chatter about. So I remember it being a good day. I think we beat them actually, didn't we? I think we did. There were not many times we beat Bay Cup that decade, but I think that was one of them. Didn't get so many, but I enjoyed every minute of it. And they were a good crowd. I think they were, because they like a drink to their supporters, and I think the old fella might have been on that day as well. So I think there were a bit of a sideshow going on. You mentioned Delroy. I mean, he was a quiet lad, wasn't he? I mean, I don't think he said much to me most of the season, but somehow he ended up on the last game of the season, and we had a bit of a drink down at Lowerhouse, and there was a disco or something, and he danced for about 3 hours to Kingston Time by UB4. He had about 10 pints of Guinness and ended up sleeping in my spare room. And I don't think I had 5 minutes conversation with him all season because he genuinely quiet lad. Following morning, I drove him back to, I think it was Clifford's or somebody, whoever were taking him to the airport or sorting his gear out or whatever. And he's getting out of the car and he said, Gary, goodbye. Don't forget to move your feet. And shut the door. And I didn't know whether he meant the dance floor or the street. And I thought, well, okay.
Brilliant. Yeah, he was a character, Delray. We mentioned him the other day. I don't know who podcast it was on, but he came over as Desmond Haynes and Gordon Greenwich's understudy. The West Indian side, a young lad, I can't remember which island he was from, but he was going to be the next opening back for the West Indies, and he went back a complete wreck with a little Guinness belly on him.
Yeah.
That's the year Cameron was our pro. You know, I have nothing but praise for Cameron, and yet he's not really remembered, I don't think, within Lowerhouse. Can you remember much about Cameron, you know, because he was a quality all-rounder, in my opinion. I don't know what your thoughts were of him for that season.
Yeah, we did. So, you know, because I think he was the first professional since I'd joined the club who socialised a bit as well. You know, so you got to know him whether you were in the first team or not. You sort of generally, you know, we'd sort of went golfing, or I think I even went to the lakes with him, and when his girlfriend was over, and Fran and that, so for a weekend or two, and you know, so we did stuff like that. He you know, he was good on and off the pitch, and I think that was the first time I saw a professional at Lowerhouse really try and get involved with the fundamentals of, you know, targets and how we practice and how you look after yourself, the sort of play hard, win hard, typical Australian mentality. And I think that was, you know, a good lesson there, that whether he was, you know, successful with us on or off the pitch, you know, it's sort of irrelevant, but the principle of what he was trying to do, and then followed on a couple of years by other professionals, I think then was the start of something generally focusing on different things about cricket. Yes, we all love to, you know, we work hard during the week and we want to go and enjoy it and have a good time, a good game of cricket at the weekend and stuff like that. But, you know, you're still playing, you're representing a club, you're playing at a relatively high standard, you're playing against international players at the top of their sport. You know, there's no other really amateur sport in England, I don't think, that where you would get that week in, week out. You're playing against world-class players at the top of their game. You know, you wouldn't get that at football, in amateur football, or, you know, tennis or golf or anything like that, would you? So I think that sort of realisation started to come through a bit more with a few players generally, not just say myself. And I think Cameron sort of, you know, started a slight change there, and I think it was only slight and subtle. But I think other professionals and you know, when you were captain, I think you embodied that as well, and sort of started that movement. Later that decade, the following years, others who followed in professionally and as captains, I think, tried to sort of build on all that.
Yeah, no, I agree. And, you know, I think times are changing as a whole. You know, it's not all just down to Cameron or that year. Times were changing, but it was, I remember, Gaz, you know, a difficult time to move from the old. We practice on the outfield, we have a few catches, and then we all go home. So it was, and I'm building up now to, you know, to getting towards the 93, 94 seasons when, you know, we were probably flattering to deceive a little bit. You know, we've had other people on that say, you know, some good players there, and there was, you know, Brian Holmes, Stan and Phil Astin. But then, you know, Blaise has come into the party, and Cappy's playing well. Ryan Escott, you know, a great player at that time. And, you know, myself and Nicky and Wall and people like that. And then, you know, we moved on to, you know, the end of 93. We had Cameron for a couple of years. You know, I finished the captaincy, you know, through work commitments. And, you know, I was a little bit, you know, we could talk about this at any other time. You know, I was fed up at the time. I wasn't really performing how I thought I should perform. I don't think I was getting the right results. For all sorts of reasons, I thought, you know, it's time for a move on. But I can't really remember how that happened in practical terms, Gary. You know, the end of 93, and then you took over in 94 when Craig Light came over. Can you remember anything about that change in captaincy?
Well, I think vaguely I remember either over the winter or maybe, you know, certainly before winter next started. I think it went on either you weren't going to do it. Some thoughts along that lines. Always Rusty or at first sort of said, "Oh, you know, have you thought about putting yourself up for it?" And we're like, "No, don't be daft." And I think Dave Wren did come in, whether he'd sent Rusty as a bit of a sentinel to sort of more of a serious chat about it, and obviously, you know, because you worked closer than before, that sort of thing. He had ideas and plans and sort of visions of what he wanted to do. By the time you'd made that decision, I decided that, maybe to have a chat with me about it.
And I do remember that when, and as it turns out at the time, I was quite, disappointed that I had to finish and my form had gone a little bit. But it's very much, and it's taught me a lot now. And I'd like to think, Joe Martin's listening to a lot of these chats, and in the future, Joe Beneducci's doing a lot for the first team and things. But it is something that, Ben Heap, current first team captain, is fantastic at the way he does, believe himself and play himself and, and feed off what he can get from other people. But we definitely went through a period then, started with Stan and other people who just didn't really believe in themselves once they got too entrenched in that captaincy. But Dooch, what do you think of that change in, how did it affect you as captain, and what's your thoughts around that?
I was fortunate because I wasn't opening the batting or opening the bowling. I had that sort of comfort zone of being a number 6 or a number 7, probably a number 7 more often than not. So I never really had to think about what I was doing as a batsman. I could purely concentrate on captaincy. I didn't really have to worry about the rest of it, because my game as a batsman was probably a bit one-dimensional in a way, because I was always going to be coming in when we're in strife or when we're trying to accelerate towards the back end of an innings. It was never a question of me demoting myself or promoting myself because of that, of where I was in the batting order. And at that time, I wasn't bowling much, so I never really had to worry about that really too much. But I know what you're saying. I have seen it affect others, and obviously we talked to Matt a few weeks ago, and he was sort of saying that he went through periods of not bowling himself because he was too busy. He was too wrapped up in the captaincy. Whereas if somebody else had been doing it, he would have been bowling a hell of a lot more.
Yeah, it is. I don't know how you felt, Gary, moving on for your 3 years of captaincy. I genuinely thought you were a quality opening batsman, who, given enough time and practice against top pros, you would have got 500 runs a year. But you, as good a captain you were, and that's not just from me, other people have said that, you didn't back yourself probably as much as you should. Just like I didn't bowl myself, it's...
Yeah, and I think there were a couple of points over those years, and there is one really funny tale which I might talk about if I'm brave enough. But where you do it, have those. Everyone has them, don't they? The ups and downs in form. But when you're captain, there's something a bit more, if you like, personal about it, in the sense of you're always wondering about possibly not going to be the one that's dropped. Therefore, you're more conscious about your worth or your value in the team or your contribution. But I think the start of that season, if I remember rightly, I think I sort of tried to preempt some of that by, maybe I should have carried on opening, but I think what happened in the winter nets, I think I had a word with Nicky and said, look, I want you to open this year. And I think he'd been batting middle order previous year or two. I don't know how many years he'd been down middle order in his first season or two. And so, and that worked pretty well. Nicky's an opening batter, and and him and Stan were usually pretty good at the top of the order. So, but then I think the problem was that was okay, but it was then where do I slot in? And I think that season, it was weird, because I think we won the first 3, and Craig Light was I think he'd 120 odd against East Lancs or somebody, and just won a game single-handedly. And then we lost the next 3, and I think they might have been sort of rain-affected games and an odd close one and a bit of bad luck or something. Then I think we won the 7th, and then I think we lost 13 on the bounce.
Yeah.
Something like that. It just
Moorhouse out.
Oh, well, that was it. It had gone from Moorhouse, the captain of Lowerhouse, to something a bit more abusive.
Ran at home and he got 130 odd. Like you said, we won the first 3, and I think everything was going swimmingly. But Craig Light was something different. He such a character in a typical young South African. What recall the goalkeeper, Gaz, who got a grip of him? Gary Bradley.
Gary Bradley, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Gary Bradley for some reason. It's Ray Bradley's son, who still watches us. Yeah. Got a grip of him in as much as, look, come out with me, I'll take you and show you Burnley. And he just...
That was the end of that.
I mean, his numbers that year looked quite good. I mean, he by his own admission, he wasn't a bowler, but obviously would turn his arm over and had a decent performance. But I think he had 1,000 runs or something. We won we won like 7 games all year or something ridiculous. You know, it's just, you know, if a pro gets 1,000 runs usually for any other side, you'd expect to finish top half probably. But so, I mean, whether that's just a reflection that the amateurs just didn't pull down, or he didn't get the runs in the right games, if you know what I mean, at the right times. He was good at chipping in with 40s and 50s, which weren't really going to win you a game. I'd rather him have got a couple of ducks and then get 130, and you're just going to, you know, you're going to win the game.
Can I just ask about pros? Because I was just looking at Cameron's stats. Obviously, we had Cameron for 2 years.
Yeah.
And then Craig came in after that. Can you remember what happened with Cameron in terms of signing him for a second season? Was it his attitude that was so impressive, so we wanted him back? Because his numbers weren't in that first year weren't actually that great. If you look, he wasn't at the top of the batting averages. He wasn't at the top of the bowling averages, and we finished 4th from bottom. So, what was the thinking in terms of having him back for a second year?
It was nearly a 2-year contract, or he was.
All right, okay.
Came over he was, I think, South Australian, and I think he'd come over with lots of promise of being an Australian international. Dave Wren had got some good contacts. You know, they'd almost said, look, we need you to keep him for a couple of years.
So come and join us, stand west in tight hands. Worsley Club still gleaming, years without a cup, never stopped us dreaming.
Welcome to Stories with Stan.
Norman Dale was the scorer and had been for quite a few years, and he was rough and tumble. Was Norman? He'd not no airs and graces, and said it how he saw it. And he was a good scorer, but it was pencil, red pen, and blue pen. And it was at the time when scoring was becoming much more sophisticated with wagon wheels and people actually denoting which batsman had faced which bowler by different coloured artifacts, items, utensils. And Norman decided that he was going to use felt-tip pens to join in this modern scoring system. And unfortunately, the paper in the scorebook was so thin that by week 4, you could see the previous matches through the paper of the current game he was scoring. And it made it real difficult to look at. So you can imagine he got a bit of stick about this, and it must have bristled with him, because we're in the bar afterwards, and Jez was only a kid at the time. You might have been 19, Jez, I don't know, but back comes the second 11. As we all do, let's have a look at the scorebook of the home game. Norman hands Jez the scorebook, and Jez says, "Bloody hell, Norman, it looks like Joseph's Technicolor Dreamcoat." I can't read a thing. At which point, Norman absolutely blows his stack and comes out with the old fallback comment, "If you can do any effing better, you effing do it." Unfortunately, in fact, he might have gripped Jez by the lapels, but fortunately nothing came of it. But Norman packed in shortly after that. So Jez was always referred to as the man that drove Norman Dale out of town in a great Wild West fashion.
It's 100% true that Joe. I think I was a bit older than that, Stan. I've just got a funny feeling it was the year we had Tom Hogan. So that would have been 87. Do you think Norman was still about then?
The reason why I think you were young, Jez, is because had he been any older, I think he'd have punched his lights out. Because he was very aggressive with you. I mean, I'm stabbing it at 19. I thought you might have even been younger, because you took it so matter of factly. I thought that's why I think you were younger, but I could be wrong.
I was in the cops, still in uniform at that stage at Burnley, but I get a phone call at home with someone asking for you in the cells. So I speak to the custody sergeant, and he says, "There's a lad called Cameron Williamson in the cells to speak to you." And he basically said, "Jez, get your horse down here and get me out of here." I said, "What's up? What's happened?" He said, "I'm pissed as Ancourt. I'm driving." So I said, "That can't do anything about that, I'm afraid, Cameron. And, you'll just have to, take what comes to you." And spoke to the custody sergeant and explained what had happened. And he got charged with drink driving and got banned for however long. But it turns out, and I will mention one name, but I'll not mention names of the professionals. They'd all gone out drinking, and they ended up at Nelson Cricket Club. And Cameron was asked, /forced, volunteered to drive them home. and a Nelson quick bowling policeman stopped him not far from Nelson Cricket Ground.
Right.
And bagged him. And rightly so, I've got to say. If you drink driving, then you deserve to get caught. Joe, back to your question, that he was certainly the right man for us, and it was certainly the right thing to bring him back. Whether it was, I think he got badly injured. I think he was always carrying a few injuries, so he never made it back in Australia. I never heard a great deal of him after that. As it turns, David Wren, crikey, another one, bless his soul, the way he used to find these professionals, and he would never discuss it a lot with the captains, or, I'm sure he had his own little group, but he wouldn't go into massive details about who's coming. I was singing Flegg's praises the other day, Gary. You just tell us what your thoughts were on Fleggs over those 50 games or so that he played for us as a man, as a cricketer, and what he did for us.
I'd describe him as a sporting hippie. He could be really serious at times, to the point you just thought, hang on a minute, where's this going? But ultimately, it was always for the right reasons. It was for just, everybody getting better at whatever it was they were trying to do. And I remember having a chat with him sort of very early on in maybe, I don't think it was before the season. I don't think we had time. I think he came fairly late, but certainly very early on after he'd arrived, about an usual thing, who's who in the team, established players, prospect. He was very, he wanted to know about, people pushing out a second team into the first team, who was going to be putting these people under pressure. And then he started talking about, practice, and, again, it wasn't very structured, was it? And, we didn't have the best facilities. And he had ideas about, a bit like, is it the coach of one of the rugby sides, whatever, about your no talent efforts. He said, well, that's okay. I can't coach somebody to be a top batsman or a top bowler overnight. But what we can do is all the other things that don't need any cricketing talent, turning up for practice, working hard, doing your drills, looking after yourself, being fit, he reckoned he could improve the coachable stuff, the batting and the bowling, just naturally 5-10% just by working hard on the other things. So he had these theories. Like I say, he was quite a deep thinker. And I think so the practicing did then get really, quite a bit of structure to it, and he's quite insistent that people turn up, and there was something going on the field all the time. You weren't just sat around behind the nets once you'd had your bat or your ball or whatever, and there was a lot of that put in. And I think again, starting from your time when sort of Cameron here, and there was the blossoms of that. I think then Fleggs coming in at the right time really was good timing for us, and trying to get a bit more of that in place.
Joe Martin, will be listening to this intently because of his coaching skills, and to coach people and get the technical skills right. But also that, I remember that was the first season. I practiced a lot before and would train hard, and whether it's from my football days, but I remember those evenings with Fleggs were really enjoyable. You would know at the end of it, your legs are burning. You know that you've had a tough time. You know that he's won everything, and you're putting everything in for him. You really got a lot out of it. The following morning, you felt great. And you got towards the weekend, you did a bit of a lighter session on a Thursday. Come to the game Saturday, you felt as fit as you're ever going to get.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think that came through in the performances, because I think we started to win then. A lot of games we wouldn't necessarily won, not because we were scoring an extra 60 or 70 runs or bowling sides out cheaply, but the tighter games, we stayed in games longer. And I always felt that that team for 3 or 4 years then, the deeper it went, we were always going to be favourite. I mean, there were so many games. I remember one at Enfield, I think it was. I think they wanted 2 off last over. We were 7 down, and I think we still won by 1 run. You bowled, you got 3 for none in last over and stuff like that. And there were games like the classic one at Accrington, Fleggs. It's just hilarious. Well, we were batting on a minefield. I think we did bat first. We got 120 odds, something like that. I think it was Charlie's debut. Yeah, it was Charlie's debut. So when they came into bat and they thought they'd won it, and they had a lad opening called Mark Stevenson, and I think it was reduced to 44 or 43 over game, and he ended up 40 not out, and they lost by 1 run. We bowled them out, and it were those type of games, the lower scoring, closer ones, and I think coming through from some of the Fleggs, the coaching and the training, the practices, whatever, any of those, we always seem to win. I can't remember losing games like that.
No, honestly, the amount of games, when we always seem to be bowling second, And it always seemed to be a little bit. I mentioned the other day, Gary, about how Flegg would always, his encouragement around the field, was phenomenal. You would always feel valued. You would always feel that something's going to happen, and we are going to get back into this game.
Ordered! Send Moorhouse to save the house! Come on, the house!
A couple of other things with Fleggs. One of the funny ones was when we were at Colne, Nick Moulding called him overseas amateur for the whole innings, and he's getting proper wind up with Fleggs. Even we were laughing at that, calling him overseas amateur. But I think that was the only time I saw him lose it on the field. There were, other than that, he was super professional. Yeah, really kept on it.
He really worked at his own game, and it's funny you should say that about the Colne game, because there was, we had that really difficult game when Fleggs got 100 and odd, and it was rained off, and then he were out for a duck in the replayed game, and all the top players. Some of the top players led on the back doing the dying fly as he walked off, and it really pissed him off. It was completely out of order, in my opinion. It really pissed him off. But he did have an attitude, didn't he, Gary, of going in dressing rooms, and you didn't want to be in there if he'd made a mistake, if he hadn't got out. He would crack a few bats around the walls in his time.
Yeah, there were nobody tougher on himself than himself, as it were, and I think that was sort of the level that he expected everybody else to be working. If you want to play first team Lancashire League cricket, then have some sort of respect for yourself and your game and the other lads who are playing. So, there's plenty of time for obviously doing all the social side of it, but yeah, on a cricketing level, I think he's just what Lowerhouse needed at that time.
Yeah, he was without a doubt. Joe Martin, have you anything you want to put to Gary or myself about that period?
Yeah, obviously in that team at the time there were lots of big personalities with Stan, Jez, and others. Did you find captaincy natural, or was it something that you worked on or had to discuss or with other people?
No, definitely not natural, Joe. I don't think anybody would say that of my style. I think it was definitely something worked on. Tried to be. You're right. That transition era. You still had Stan, Phil Astin, Jez knocking around, who's obviously done the job, super supportive in that sense. Maybe sometimes fall between the cracks of trying to please everyone instead of just sticking to your own guns. And I think when we did eventually, sort of second, third season, do that. And say, right, okay, this is what we all want to buy into. I think it worked a lot better and people respect you a bit more for it. I think that first season of just trying to keep too many people happy just didn't work. I learnt a lot, all the players learnt a lot, I think. But yeah, I mean, it was great. And, you still have to deal with the daft moments. I can remember we were playing Rami and Iggy were keeping wicket. And I think he'd come back to somebody who were injured, maybe Chippy or got married or something like that. And we're playing Ramsbottom. And Peter Sleep was pro for Ramsbottom. And him and Dearden who have put 100 on or something, probably 96 maybe, 95, it must have been third season. Anyway, we couldn't buy a wicket. So I'm looking around the team thinking, who can we put on? So I tried Blaise, throw a ball to Blaise, just get us a wicket, just do something or whatever. So Peter Sleep turns around to Iggy behind stumps and says, Blaise bowling? And Iggy goes, yeah. He says, what does he bowl? I said, what does he bowl? So Iggy says, well, he wobbles them a bit, medium, military medium. Right. Watch out for his slower one. First two balls go for four apiece. Next two balls were going same direction, balls, some fantastic fielding, or whatever, just full length diving stops. And then I think fortunately got a leg by and we're off strike, and that was it. But yeah, you're having to sort of deal with stuff like that as well. It just, unreal.
Yeah, I remember that. We had a laugh and a joke with Higgy after the game about that, and he didn't know what he'd done wrong. What are you talking about? What are you on about? Yeah.
What happened to bring it to an end, the captaincy?
Sort of finding it tough, work and home-wise, young family starting, probably with Flegg's not coming back. I'm not sure who we were thinking again in pro that season. But I think my performances have been pretty dire, to be honest. And I ended up dropping myself way. I ended up batting at like 8, 9 or something some weeks. Yeah, that was it really. We're just not feeling in a position where contribute enough, even through captaincy, to be able to. And the seconds were doing quite well. Then there were kids coming through. Another step where I think was it Matt who took over afterwards.
Yeah,
or Nicky maybe.
Sorry to bring this up, but do you remember playing a 13 game at home against Rishton when you were still first team captain?
Yeah, that was the one I was touching on earlier on, and yeah.
Go on, tell us the story.
I think that's probably part of the decision of the final decision that you were actually alluding to earlier. Why I'm packing up, but yeah. So again, couldn't buy a run. I think we'd had a period where we couldn't net either. It was so wet. Yeah, it was horrible, and foolishly thought a run out in the thirds might just back myself back into a bit of form. And I swear to this day, that lad has never bowled as good a ball since. or before. Yeah, so one golden duck later, similar thing. Everyone laughing the socks off. Yeah, I just thought, well, maybe that's the signal.
I don't know who told that. It's a number of years ago. You might have been with us, Gary. We were in the club, and obviously it got embellished. It was probably Stan, and it got to the story where every first team cricketer, every second team cricketer that Van Moorhouse had shafted were in the club having a beer, watching some league game, and you decided to play for thirds to show us all and got a golden duck.
Yeah. You're right, yeah. There were, I think it was a cup final day or something. There was some football, Charity Shield maybe, or something. There was some football on. Nah.
But I'm just looking through he said exactly as you said, Gary. You're up and down the batting order. 4, 5, and then you're 7, and then you're 6, and then you're 8 and 9, and it certainly doesn't do that batsman any good. As a captain, you're trying to keep everything else together. But I've got Paul Stanley said it the other day. It was an absolute pleasure playing under you. And as far as technical, I played a little bit under Joe and quite a bit under Mark when we won the cup. But I've got to say, Lofty going back a number of years under anyone who technically could think about the game and work things out. And I know you're going to say Flegg's helped you a lot with that. But I've got to say it was an absolute pleasure. It helped me so much, probably because of 3 years of frustration. I mean, you bowled me into the ground, but it was 3 years of frustration that allowed me to go on and start bowling properly. I really did enjoy those 3 years. It really was a pleasure.
It's the reason he can't walk, I think, isn't it, Jess?
Yeah, that's right. I need a wheelchair.
Well, that was it. It was like, how dare you give up captaincy and give it me?
It gets touched upon quite a lot, and I might be speaking out of turn, talking about professional game compared to the amateur game. But I think in amateur cricket, and Charlie did it for a large proportion of his captaincy, and it is the idea of trying to please everybody. So you drop yourself down the order, so then someone else can have a go, right? Even though Charlie should have been batting number 3, but he was batting 8, 9, and 10. Yeah. I remember him and Blaise batting 10 and 11 one game, and I'm batting before him, and there's no way that should be happening. Whereas when you compare it to professional cricket, if they're a captain and they bat at number 4, that's where they bat. So I think sacrificing themselves is part of the course in amateur cricket, unfortunately.
Just looking at the professionals there, Gary, I wonder if you dodged a swerve ball in '96 when you packed in because Corrie came the year after.
Well, if you want to packed in at end of '96, you'd have definitely packed in at end of '97.
Yeah. Oh, that was a horror season. That was a horror season.
Yeah, we've not had much conversation about that, the two Joes. We might need to. I think that would be worth one episode on its own.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. We'll see if we can get him on.
Can you do Zoom in prison?
He came to us, convinced somebody had bowled out Mark Ramprakash, Graham Thorpe and somebody else in an England warm-up game on a tour out there. and that he were like God's gift. And my days.
Yeah, we will. We'll have to have a full season with that. Get back onto that, Gary, because you played all that year, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and there were committee revolts, there were membership revolts. We had meetings. There were called super AGMs and extraordinary AGMs, and bad times.
Yeah, it was. It was. It was difficult. So I think we should do that season in full.
Heaton was so much deluded about what his version of events. It was unreal. I mean, it was Ryan who went out to bat with him and told him exactly what I was thinking at the time. So that bit of it he got right. Touching back on that Accrington game, I mean, Brian Holmes was captain for Accrington when Mark Stevenson was doing a stand and getting a run and over. And he was at top of the stairs, begging him first to get himself out and instructing him to get himself out. We're all telling this lad, look, your skipper wants rid of you, and he couldn't get himself out for love and money, lost again. So I never got that far with Stan, like actually shouting across the field with him. But we had a few heart-to-hearts, bless him, over times. But I think we were both respected each other's position. I think pros-wise, I think there was only one real run-in I can remember having with an opposition pro, and that was Brad McNamara, pro for Azzy. And they came down to our place, and I think Matt might have got him for a duck and give him a send-off. And I think he thought they were me. So at interval, he's waiting for me and he gives me a load of verbs. Wait while you get in, I'm going to bang shout and I'm going to give you all this. And then they beat us. And I think a couple of their lads had to hold him back because he was ready for having a go at somebody. And I think that was the only time. He was an head the ball as well. So I think that was the only time we got close to falling out with a pro physically. I mean, some daft players, and you like Capper, James Capstick, these were back in the days where you guys, you don't know, you were born now, but we had to work the bar like 3 nights a week.
I used to work the bar, Gary. I've done loads of shifts behind bar. You'd
have Rusty ringing you up on Thursday saying, I've just booked an 18th in, which meant they were all 16. And so, there's 2 of you working bar. We've run out of bitter and lemonade and mixers by about 8:30. We were having to go down to Lowerhouse canteen to nick a barrel, a keg of their beer. And Cappy, James Capstick's picking glasses up. So he goes out, go outside. There's a load outside. They've been on steps drinking. He comes back 10 minutes later, a load of pint glasses. It's great. Washing them up, dries them, puts them on shelf. What do you want me to do now? And he says, oh, and by the way, Pop-Up's on fire. Wait, what do you mean Pop-Up's on fire? And this were days when we had a big green shed, like porter cabin behind sight screen on car park, the Pop-Up. And I goes out, and it wasn't a bit of smoke coming from under the door. This thing was towering in inferno. And he'd been stood at bar 20 minutes before he decided to tell me. So by the time fire brigade, and that was the limit you were dealing with sometimes. It just, tales like that on and off the pitch. Unbelievable.
You imagine that, first team captain working behind the bar and Cappy coming in with something like that. Just going back to the Brad McNamara, Gary, I think you might find what happened was McNamara came out and it was an absolute dust bowl. And Matt's bowling at him just short of a length and it's not getting above his shoelaces. And he's getting madder and madder and madder. Can't hit it off a square. And he was the type of player that wanted to smash it. Matt had 3 or 4 LB shouts, which were really close. And eventually got him LB. So Matt really gives him a send-off because he's slagging the pitch up. He actually said something like, you want to dig this fucking thing up and turn it into a sandcastle. And Matt saw
That's it, yeah.
So he's all about, and we're in a huddle. There were a few chirpers in that team, Gary. Flegs was a right little stirrer, and then your chipper that would just fire bullets for everyone. So he's walking off his McNamara, and he's walking backwards stroke sideways, with his bat in the air, shaking it back at us lot at the on the square. And I'm convinced it were Gary Moorhouse, but McNamara is walking in towards the tea room, and he's 10 foot from the bed, and Gary shouts, "That's a tea room, you dickhead, the dressing room." The spectators heard this, and he had to stop, look around, realise that Steve Barrington and Iggy are having cups of tea. found it to go in dressing room. So that's why he was mad.
Yeah, so maybe he did think it
brilliant.
was me correctly then.
There was, he was a bit of a stirrer, was Flag.
I've really enjoyed that that chat. I was extremely young when you played, Gary, and even when I came to watch, invariably it was watching Shez in the twos. So in that period, I didn't really watch a lot. So it's been the 90s. I don't really know anything about. So it's really good to get a bit of insight into that. I guess the last thing I would say is that anybody that played in the 90s has always, and we've talked with, have all said how good a captain you were to play with. If nothing else, I think we can just confirm that tonight.
Yeah, thanks for that, Joe. But I really enjoyed that period, those sort of 3 years captain, and then I think when Nicky and Matt sort of followed on as well, they had their own styles, but we generally have a good chat together, and usually Jez in there as well, and just sort of sharing those sort of ideas and trying to help each other, whoever we're doing the job. Yeah, I mean, to get back to sort of the common denominator in a lot of these tales, Mr. Heaton. I mean, I don't think he didn't go out looking to be centre of all the buffoonery, did he? But somehow he managed to find himself there. And this was genuinely not premeditated in any way on his part. But it was a home game against Rottenstall, baking hot day. We won toss and battered first, and Stan's real. It looked a good track down at Lowerhouse, and we were changing. There's some runs in this, and I think even normally there might be 3 or 4 of us padded up or whatever, but a group of us traipsed off, get us shorts on, and traipsed off for a walk round. And we're sat up by Old Entrance on Liverpool Road there. We're at a grand vantage point, and a few of us go by, and Stan's looking good. And they had a bowler, young lad, blonde lad, John. I think you remember his name, John Glasses. I think he had.
Yeah, was it John Dawson?
John Dawson.
It. Yeah, John Dawson. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, John Dawson. And he just slow. He trundled up, and he'd slow action sort of thing. Anyway, he's been bowled a couple of overs, bowling to Stan from Liverpool Road end, and he let the ball slip through his delivery stride, and it trickles its way down and stops, about 5 yards from Stan, and so there's a bit of ooh-ah and all this. Well, not ooh-ah, but bowlers, fielders, Rottenstall fielders were giving bowlers some jip, and as they converged to pick the ball up, Stan took like 3 really authoritative steps out of his crease, put his hand up as if he was halting traffic, on traffic duty at Wellington or something, and he went, "I want to play it." So everyone, all fielders had to stay where they are, regulations and stuff. And we thought, oh well, happy days here, free shot. Well, he took this almighty wind up and aiming for Liverpool, for Lowerhouse Lane down Crown there, and he swung himself off his feet, completely missed the ball. Oh
Yeah.
Man, that was. Oh, I just died. And like I said, we were all sat there catching a few rays, and just I was sat on a rail, I think. I nearly fell off, and all fielders were pissing the sides, and crowd were pissing the sides, and I couldn't say. I had tears running down my leg that day. That were unbelievably funny. Yeah, and then there he arrives again, Mr. Heaton.
Yeah, exactly. I do remember it, Gary, because it was really nice and warm, and there were probably 5 or 6 of us laid there. And Stan's told this story over a pint previously. And he said, and I remember it, and it's another one of his most embarrassing moments ever in cricket. He said, but what made it worse, I looked round, I didn't know where to look. I'm looking for some support from his teammates. And I got 5 or 6 buffoons that looked like beetles and had fallen on the back, kicking their arms and legs in the air. Yeah, absolutely fantastic times.
Oh, that were hilarious, yeah. So, yeah, I'm sure, there'll be many people bring up a few tales concerning the same gentleman further down the line. I look forward to hearing them.
Yeah, but he does get his own back, does Stan. Fair play to him. He takes it all in. He'll accept all the laughs and the stick, but he'll always come back, and he always seems to come back stronger and better. So, the little extracts we've got now, and we're still recording them, Stan stories. there's more and more going to come out of them, I have no doubt.
And it was great in some of those tough times when we were losing an odd game or two, and Stan, in terms of his wit and humour, and obviously a few characters with pressure points in the team and fire back, and I think the team morale, the dressing room, it was tight as anything, and it was mainly through like the humour side of it. And Stan was central to that. It was fantastic.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, sometimes it probably frustrated me and you a little bit more than others when we were really trying to nail things down. But you certainly no regrets of the way Stan was, and and how he did keep, and still keeps the club together. He is a fantastic stalwart for the club. I mean, there are some great funny stories throughout all our careers and everything, but I do remember one when we were, I'm quite sure we were at home, and it was absolutely wet through, and I'm not sure whether we wanted to play, we didn't want to play, but you had a great conversation with an umpire. Can you remember that?
Yeah, that was funny. We had this umpire. It happened for about we had a really wet month as usual, or whatever, June or something like that. And I think we had this umpire sort of few games on bounce, and it became a bit of a thing. And I think the game you're referring to, I think we were at home, and it was the first time it happened. And to be honest, I think we were on wrong end of a potential hiding, and we were looking for rain to save us a bit. And so we'd had a break for rain. Umpires were keen to get us back out, and I'm like, well, I'm not so sure, I think I'm not going to put spinners on. I don't want to do that sort of thing. So I'm going to have to bowl seam balls. I don't think run-ups are safe. And then this umpire, I can't remember his name. I tried my best to get on with umpires and get on the right side of them. There were enough in the team who got other way sometimes. So I always try my best. And I were bad with umpires' names, but he were keen as mustard with this lad, and he obviously loved doing it. I said, well, I don't think it's safe. And he said, well, what if I try it? What if I prove that it'll be all right? If I can run in, surely your bowlers can. Right, okay, then go on then. So it came off like, I don't know if he'd been bowling at one particular end, but it were a shortish run. I said, no. So you need to run off Jez's run up, because that's going to be at full pace. So he went back further and back, and fair play to him. He ran in and he bowled. He didn't sort of just trundle through it. He bowled. Yeah. And he went, there, it's all right. I think it's all right. And I said, well, yeah. Trouble is, I'm thinking of bowling him right wicket when we come back. So can you do it on the other side as well, thinking he's going to tell me where to go? But sure enough, he went up and he bowled right wicket. I thought, well, I've no argument then. And then when we had him a week later, or 2 or 3 weeks later, and the same happened again. And I said, well, I'm going to ask. And it was brilliant. And by that time, I think dressing room had all clocked on, and they were banging on windows, and cheers went up when he did it. So that was hilarious. Funny.
Yeah, I do remember that. We're in dressing room, and I think someone had said to you as you're going out, I'll bet your pint you can't get to do it again. And you did. A fair play to him. I have no idea what his name was, but he was a nice enough fella, and probably just wanted to get the game on. But yeah, great memories that this umpire running in his flats with his white coat on. Fantastic, loved it.
Gordon, send Moorhouse to save the house. Come on, the house!
So I think we were due to play at Bacup away, and he rang me up and said, will you come? I'll come over to Bacup with you. Will you come and pick me up? And he lived in Barlett them days, so we were drive over there. And then over to Bacup, so like an hour and a half to get to the game. So we was going up to Lane Head. He says, "Oh, take a next left here." Bit quizzical, what's going on? Pull up outside number 14. Right, okay. So he says, gets out of the car, leans in, winks at me. I've got a promise on. Right, okay. Here's me, pride as punch, thinking he's going to come and watch me play cricket. Right, so I think, I need to have a look at this. So I hung around. So he walks up to the front door, knocks, and door opens, and a bloke comes to the door. So there's a bit of chat and some pointing down the street, and then he comes back down into the car, gets in, and says, "Right, lad, top leg it. That's her husband." So we go on to cricket and we play a game, and he's obviously enjoying bar situation. And next thing I know, this woman and fella walk on. So he's trying to make himself scarce, and then there's a bit of a rumpus, and he wasn't involved. He wasn't any of them, but I thought it were. I thought, oh shit, it's all kicked off. So I'm trying to play cricket and keeping one eye on bar. Turns out it were nothing to do with him. Anyway, I don't know where he ended up, because by the time we'd finished, he were long gone, and that was last I think I saw of him that season.
Yeah, I mean, it was, again, Gary, stories about your dad are absolutely, fantastic. He came watching us a lot, and I remember, when you were captain, and when he was the proudest man in the land, stood on those steps, a few pints in with a few of his mates. What did he used to shout at you? "That's my boy!"
That's my boy.
My boy.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Oh dear. Yeah, and he were, and he used to wind up opposition pros, calling Paul Rifle Skippy and all this sort of stuff. And his feuds with Shapcott and Budgie Supping and all that sort of stuff. I mean, he were proper entertaining.
Yeah, it was. They were happy days, bless him. And like you said, at the start of the podcast, he played down at the house, so fantastic times.